Pacific on the A&E Mystery Movie. This is Biography, celebrating 10 years on A&E. For September 29, 1997, Biography with Jack Perkins.
The name says it all. More than 4 centuries ago, Ivan the Terrible ruled Russia through cruelty and terror. His appetites were legendary. He lusted after power, killing anyone who got in his way, even his own son. He lusted after blood, resorting to torture, once slaughtering an entire town. He lusted after women, had 7 wives, kept 50 other women as concubines. And while he was committing his multiple crimes and sins, Ivan the Terrible insisted that he was deeply devoted to God and the church. Just how terrible was Ivan? Well, probably this century's greatest butcher, Joseph Stalin, was so enthralled by Ivan the Terrible, he ordered a film about his life. The scenes from that movie are included in our biography. It seems Stalin felt Ivan was the ultimate Russian. It's easy to understand why Ivan the Terrible was an inspiration to Stalin. He was a ruler who did everything in his power to live up to his nickname.
The Renaissance had reached its greatest glory. Leonardo, Michelangelo were already part of the past. Henry VIII ruled over England, and the Spanish had encircled the globe. Yet in a land known as Muscovy, the Dark Ages lingered, and the nation struggled daily to avoid economic and political collapse. The force that would save it was embodied in a man, a volatile mixture of piety and ruthless intrigue, whose cunning and cruelty would one day control the largest nation on earth. His enemies and friends alike were victims by the thousands of ruthless ambition and very possibly madness. He unified his country, but made his people pay in blood. Despite this gruesome toll, his story was deemed so crucial to Russian morale that a monumental film about his life was commissioned during the grimmest days of World War II. He was Ivan IV, the first to rule his country with the new Russian title of Tsar. Tsar Ivan the Terrible. On August 25th, 1530, inside the Kremlin Palace, a child was born, a first son, to Crown Prince Vasily III and his wife. The child, named Ivan, entered the world in a shadow, the focus of a dire prediction that many considered a curse. A holy man had given the proud ruler an unsettling prophecy. You shall have an evil son. Your nation shall fall prey to terror and tears. Rivers of blood will flow. The curse was not unwarranted. Ivan's father, Vasily, had earned the church's wrath by defying strict decrees against divorce. In the quest for an heir, Vasily had succumbed to drastic measures. After 20 childless years of marriage, the aging monarch desperately needed a son to continue the family line. His barren wife, Solomonia, was sent to a convent, and he wed the 23-year-old Elena Glinska. This unsanctified union resulted in Ivan, and the boy was named after his revered grandfather, who had started the empire's revitalization. Ivan's childhood was marked by illness and darkened by tragedy. 2 years after his birth, his father, Vasily, the ruler of Muscovy, died unexpectedly at 56 years old, the victim of a boil that grew infected and turned gangrenous. Elena, Ivan's mother, then took over as regent, attempting to solidify support for the policies her husband began. Yet she only lived another 6 years, poisoned, according to many accounts, by her enemies at court. So Ivan, at 8, was an orphan, forcibly kept apart from his deaf-mute brother and his maternal relatives, raised by a series of ever-changing maidservants and advisors. As depicted in the famous Sergei Eisenstein film, Ivan the Terrible, the palace courts and lavish churches of the walled-in city called the Kremlin would be young Ivan's only playground.
This child could see that people were bowing to him. He saw how he was being glorified. At the same time, he saw they had no respect for him because he was a boy. It was this contradictory reality that formed an incredibly complex character who trusted no one, but was utterly convinced of one thing: I am God on earth.
The boyars, the elite ruling class, were in control. When Ivan reached the age of 17, they decided it was time to make him Muscovy's official crown prince. The people needed somebody, a figurehead, to rally around. Ivan resented the boyars. He felt they were too powerful and couldn't be trusted. On the advice of the head of the church, he rejected the title Crown Prince for a title more ancient and glorious. He would be Tsar, the Russian form of Caesar. Ivan was the first Russian Tsar. In this remarkable filmed recreation of Ivan's early years, the Tsar was depicted as a strong but just ruler. There was never a hint of the enduring reputation that one day would spread terror and fear among Ivan's own people.
Отныне русской земле единой быть.
In 1547, the future looked bright, and soon after being crowned, Ivan prepared for marriage. Tradition required that hundreds of virgins from the very best families compete for the honor of bearing the heir to the crown. In practice, though, very few women met the boyar advisors' strict political criteria. From this small elite number of candidates, Ivan selected Anastasia Romanova Zakharina, a member of a non-princely boyar family. Little is known of their life together, but evidence suggests they were devoted to each other during good times and the bad ones that still lay ahead. The marriage would also be forced to endure the harsh realities of life in the tumultuous, nearly bankrupt country Ivan had inherited. Compared to Europe, Russia was primitive. It was a nation with no banks, no formal roads, or essential infrastructure to support commerce and trade. Ivan initiated important reforms almost immediately to address these vital issues. But there were obstacles. He was unable to exert his authority in much of his vast realm. In Moscow, he had to contend with the intrigues of an ambitious court. And perhaps most threatening were foreign enemies poised on all of Russia's borders. In the first year of his rule, Ivan was challenged by a catastrophic event. A sudden wind-stoked fire that came sweeping through Moscow, a city of wooden buildings, destroying almost 2/3 of them, including part of the Kremlin. In the fire's wake, a mob attacked the Kremlin, captured a relative of the Tsar's who was thought to be responsible for starting the blaze, and murdered him. Ivan retaliated. He arrested the political adversaries who he believed had started the riot, took them to Red Square, and hanged them. The Tsar had acted swiftly and decisively, a bold act for a ruler who was still in his teens. But the far greater challenges of 1550 Russia almost surely lay ahead. If Ivan was indeed, in the words of the prophecy, an evil son whose nation would fall prey to terror and tears, those terrors were already storming the gates.
You're watching Ivan the Terrible on Biography.
Integrity is the foundation. Humanity is the stone. Compassion is the mortar. Strength is the steel. These are the values that built this company. These are the values behind the products we offer and the services we provide. For more than 150 years, these are the values that have made New York Life the company you keep.
Traditional luxury cars. The slumber, the serenity, the isolation. Hey, you're not dead yet. Presenting the supercharged Bonneville, one of the world's most powerful sports sedans. Made traditional luxury, rest in peace. Luxury with attitude. The Bonneville by Pontiac.
Just a typical morning at a Wyndham hotel.
Ever notice how some people actually like business travel? Well, maybe it's because they're doing it the right way. Wyndham Hotels and Resorts. The right way. The Wyndham way.
A&E's look at Ivan the Terrible continues on Biography.
Ivan, only 17 in the year 1547, had already felt the first rush of imperial power. He had crushed domestic foes with fatal force. Yet the nation itself was a far greater challenge. 4 to 7 million people, half of France's population in the mid-1500s, lived on nearly 3/4 million square miles of dramatically varied terrain. To the west and north, hostile nations prevented ready access to Baltic Sea trade routes. To the south and east, the country's foremost enemies, the Tatars, stood between Russia and expanded trade with Asia. The Tatars, descendants of Genghis Khan, were notorious conquerors. They looted Russian villages, raped women and kidnapped both women and men, the adolescents and adults, to sell as slaves throughout the Middle East and the Ottoman Empire. Their ceaseless aggression forced Ivan, at the age of 22, to mount his first attack on Russia's enemies. He led his army to the Tatar fortress city of Kazan. 6,000 Russian soldiers to do battle against 30,000 Tatars in command of a stronghold that had never been breached. But Ivan had at least two advantages that he felt would assure him a victory. The skills of his trusted young general, Prince Andrei Kurbsky, and something that his predecessors never employed, gunpowder. Ivan hired Dutch engineers to build tunnels underneath the seemingly impenetrable garrison walls. Then barrels of powder were rolled in and set off. After a 5-month siege, Kazan, the gateway to Persia and in time the farther reaches of Siberia, was now in the hands of the Tsar.